She had lived in that house long before it was filled with the sounds of her grandson's laughter. Now she barely felt welcome in her own kitchen. Her birthday had passed without a candle, yet the whole family was preparing for her grandson's big day like it was a royal affair. Then came the message. Just 7 words that stopped her cold. Check the garage before Friday. Trust me. She waited until everyone left. She walked down those quiet stairs. She turned the knob with trembling hands. What she found would not only unravel the lies, but expose a truth buried for decades. And no one in that house was ready for it. She woke before the sun like she always did, not because she had somewhere to be, but because the silence of morning was the only part of the day that truly felt hers. The house, a spacious 2-story in a quiet suburban cul-de-sac, should have felt like home. She had helped pick out the tile in the kitchen when the foundation was still being poured, had planted roses along the fence line before her grandson was even born. But now, she lived in the farthest room from the kitchen, the one that shared a wall with the garage. They called it the guest room. She knew better. It had no windows, just a single floor lamp and a twin bed with a sag in the middle. Her clothes were tucked into plastic bins under the bed. The closet was already full of things that didn't belong to her. She wasn't asked about dinner plans, wasn't told when guests were coming. Her job, unstated but understood, was to keep the house clean, mind her own space, and be ready to watch her grandson whenever needed. Most days, she did just that. She braided Ethan's hair for crazy hair day at school, packed his lunch the way he liked it, cut into triangles, crusts off, no jelly. She smiled when her daughter-in-law corrected her in front of Ethan for using too much butter on toast. She held her tongue when her son said, "Mom, maybe just let us handle the parenting stuff." No one meant to hurt her. That's what she told herself. They were busy. Life was different now. She was lucky to be living with family. That's what people said, right? Still, every night after Ethan went to bed and the house went quiet, she would lie awake staring at the ceiling, wondering when exactly she had shifted from mother to live-in helper. It was 3 days before Ethan's birthday when the message came. It wasn't a call, not even a text from someone she knew, just a small slip of paper folded into the spine of the latest People magazine in the mailbox, one she didn't subscribe to. In blocky handwriting, no return address. Check the garage before Friday. Trust me. She read it twice, then again. She looked around instinctively as if someone were watching, but the cul-de-sac was empty, the houses all shut tight. She slipped the paper into her pocket and went back inside. That night at dinner, she asked, casually, "Has anyone been in the garage lately?" Her son barely looked up from his phone. "Why?" "No reason," she said. "Just wondering. You used to keep old family stuff out there." Her daughter-in-law scoffed. "It's all junk now, tools, paint cans, dangerous things. That's why we keep it locked. Ethan doesn't go in, and you shouldn't either. Too easy to trip." That was new. Locked. When had they started locking it? She nodded, said nothing. But something stirred beneath the surface of her thoughts. A feeling she hadn't had in years. Curiosity, maybe, or something more primal. A sense that something wasn't right. That night, she tried the garage door. As expected, locked. But from the inside, through the small connecting door near her room, it clicked open with the turn of the knob. She didn't step in. Not yet. Instead, she sat on the edge of her bed, the paper in her hand, the silence pressing against her skin. Who had written it? Who would know that she needed to see something in there? And why now? She thought back to old stories her husband used to tell. About hiding things in plain sight, about writing letters instead of fighting. He was a quiet man, but clever. Before he died, he'd insisted on updating the house paperwork, said, one day it might matter who signed what. She hadn't thought about that conversation in years. Could this be about that? Friday was coming, and whatever was in the garage, she knew she had to face it alone. The next morning, she waited until the house was empty. Her son had taken Ethan to school. Her daughter-in-law was off to a hair appointment, her voice echoing, "Back by noon," as the door slammed shut behind her. She moved quickly, heart pounding louder than her footsteps. She slipped into the hallway, turned the corner, and faced the door to the garage. It still opened with a single turn of the knob. No creak, no resistance, like it had never been locked at all. The garage smelled of stale air, oil, and forgotten things. Shafts of light filtered in through a narrow window covered with grime. Dust floated like tiny ghosts in the quiet. She hadn't been in here in years, maybe a decade. Stacks of boxes lined the left wall, some half crushed under their own weight. Shelves were cluttered with tools, paint cans, and baby gear that hadn't been used since Ethan was in diapers. But what caught her eye was the far corner, where an old cedar chest sat, barely visible beneath a moth-eaten tarp. She crossed the room slowly, hands trembling as she peeled the cover away. The chest was locked, but the key, as if waiting for her, was tucked in a plastic bag hanging on a nail above it. She opened it with a soft click. Inside, everything was intact, preserved, a collection of documents, photo albums, and yellowing folders. Her fingers moved instinctively, pulling out papers one by one. The original deed to the house, building permits from when it was first constructed, receipts from the contractors, and her name, printed clearly on every page. She sat on a stool nearby and flipped open one of the folders. It contained a single envelope, handwritten in familiar script. She hadn't seen that handwriting in 6 years, but she would never forget it. Her husband's. She opened it with careful hands. "My love," it began. "If you're reading this, I'm no longer there to remind them, but you must remember, this house was always yours. You chose the paint, the cabinets, even the crooked brick in the driveway that everyone else hated but you loved. If they ever try to make you feel small inside these walls, stand tall. This is your home. Never forget who you are." She held the letter to her chest. Her throat tightened and tears blurred her vision, but she didn't cry. Not yet. She closed the chest and pushed the key back into the bag. Then she tucked the deed and the letter under her sweater and made her way back inside. As she turned down the hallway, voices drifted from the kitchen. She paused. She hadn't heard the front door open, but they were back. Her daughter-in-law's voice was clear, casual. "After Ethan's party, we should finally talk about transferring the house title. It's just easier when everything's in our name. You know, clean." Her son replied, "I know, but she's still here. It'll feel like we're pushing her out." "We're not," the woman said. "We're just making things efficient. She doesn't need to be involved in paperwork she doesn't understand. She'll be fine." "She's your mother," he muttered. "She's your mother," she snapped back. She stood frozen in the hallway. The paper under her sweater suddenly felt heavier, hotter, like it might burn through the fabric. She turned quietly and slipped back into her room. She sat on the bed staring at the door. So this was their plan. The kindness, the tolerance. It was conditional, temporary. They were managing her like you manage an aging pet. Kind words, gentle tones, all while waiting for the right moment to quietly remove her from the space. Her room wasn't just far from the kitchen. It was out of sight, out of mind. She'd been moved to the shadows, and now they were preparing to erase her from the structure altogether. The house that bore her fingerprints in the grout, her recipes on the walls, her laughter in the nursery, was about to be declared someone else's. She didn't know what to feel first: anger, sadness, betrayal. But most of all, a strange, cold clarity. They didn't know what was in the garage. They didn't know what she had just found. And they were about to find out what happens when someone forgets who really built the home they live in. She didn't sleep that night. Not really. Her eyes closed, but her mind spun, turning over every word she had heard, every scrap of paper now tucked under the mattress. Morning light barely touched the edges of the blinds when she got up and opened her drawer. Inside, tucked between old photographs and a Bible, was a small black tape recorder she hadn't used since her teaching days. She slid it into her cardigan pocket. There were things she needed to catch now: proof, words, timing. She knew how to move quietly. She had raised a son through teenage years. Silence was second nature. The next few days passed like a slow-moving dream. While packing Ethan's birthday gift or folding laundry, she turned the recorder on and left it under the table. When conversations rose near the kitchen, she was nearby, humming to herself but listening carefully. She snapped pictures of envelopes, documents left on the counter. She looked through her old storage boxes in the attic, digging out the original house agreement, the one her husband had made sure they both signed. Then she did what she had avoided for years. She called Harold Burns. Harold was her late husband's attorney and golf buddy. They hadn't spoken since the funeral, but he recognized her voice immediately. "Well, I'll be damned," he said. "I thought you'd moved out to Arizona or something." "I wish," she said. "Harold, I need a favor." He met her the next afternoon at a diner 2 towns over. She brought the documents and slid them across the table. "Still looks official," he said, scanning the papers. "Yep, that's my old signature there, and, yes, here it is." He tapped the margin of the deed, a small line written in her husband's blocky script. No transfer of ownership without written consent from both parties. "Smart man," Harold said. "Knew how families can be." She nodded, quiet. "You want me to do something?" he asked gently. "Just keep it for now, in case they try to force anything." He folded the papers and tucked them into a leather folder. "I'll keep them safe. And if you ever want me to act, just say the word." She left the diner feeling heavier, not lighter. Truth had a weight to it. It pressed down like gravity. But for once, she also felt planted, rooted in something that couldn't be taken away by a dinner conversation or a careless remark. That evening, as she helped Ethan with his homework, he looked up at her with a serious face. "Ba, are you going to leave?" She blinked. "Why would you ask that?" "I heard Mom say it, that maybe after my birthday you'd move somewhere else." Her chest tightened. "Do you want me to leave?" "No," he said, eyes wide. "I want you to stay forever." She smiled and brushed his hair back. "Then I'll be right here." There was a long pause before he asked, "Ba, are you a guest?" The word hit her like a slap. "What?" "I mean, they said you shouldn't go in the garage because you're not the owner. That's for owners, right? Are you, like a guest in the house?" She couldn't find her voice at first. Then she said softly, "No, sweetheart. This is my home. It always has been." He nodded, but something still puzzled him. He got up and fetched his tablet, tapping rapidly. Then he looked back at her with a guilty expression. "Did you get a message from someone? Like in a magazine?" She froze. "Why?" He bit his lip. "I asked the AI bot to send you something. I used Mom's old mail app. I told it what to write. I just wanted you to find the garage stuff before you got sad." She stared at him. "I didn't want you to cry again," he whispered. "I heard you one night. You thought I was asleep." She pulled him into her arms, held him tighter than she had in years. "I'm so sorry," she said. "You should never have to worry about grown-up things. I just wanted you to know you matter." Tears came freely then, not from pain, but from the fierce, radiant love only a child could offer. That message, the spark that had unraveled everything, had come from the smallest voice in the house, a voice that saw her not as a burden or a tenant, but as his person. In that moment, the shadows of betrayal and fear softened, just a little, but the fight wasn't over. Not yet. The house buzzed with balloons, frosting, and noise. Ethan's birthday had arrived, and the entire downstairs was transformed. Streamers dangled from the chandelier, cartoon characters grinned from the paper plates, and a magician in suspenders set up tricks near the fireplace. Children darted between rooms, shouting with laughter. She was assigned to Kid Patrol. That was the phrase her daughter-in-law used, smiling as she handed her a pack of juice boxes. "Can you just keep them away from the cake table? Oh, and no need to worry about pictures. We've got a photographer coming." So she sat, off to the side, legs aching, in a folding chair by the sliding door. Every so often, a toddler wandered too close to the gifts, and she gently redirected them. No one handed her a slice of cake. No one asked her to pose for a photo with Ethan. She wasn't in the pictures. She wasn't even in the room, not really. And yet she had never seen things more clearly. In her pocket was an envelope, thick, unassuming, sealed. The front read simply, "For the homeowners." Inside were copies of the deed, the handwritten clause from her husband, the lawyer's statement, and her own quiet declaration that she was not to be erased, not by neglect, not by silence. She watched as Ethan opened a new bike, shouted with joy. Her son beamed. Her daughter-in-law smiled for the camera. Everyone clapped. And when the noise was loudest, when the children were distracted by balloons and the magician's finale, she stood and moved to the table where the gifts were piled, calm, steady, invisible. She placed the envelope at the center of the stack, then she returned to her chair. No one noticed until the doorbell rang. It was an older woman, hair perfectly set, cardigan pressed, a soft travel bag slung over one shoulder. She looked around the room with the kind of entitlement that only came from knowing you were expected. Her daughter-in-law's face lit up. "Mom, you made it!" The woman stepped in and kissed her cheek. "Of course, dear. You said I should see the house before we unpack everything." Unpack? Her heart slowed. Her son rushed over. "Hi, Mrs. Tiff. Let me take your bag." Her daughter-in-law turned to her with a wide grin. "Oh, I didn't get to tell you yet. We're having my mom move in. Isn't that great? So you won't be the only older woman in the house." She smiled like it was some kind of gift. "Don't worry, we'll make room," she added. "Maybe shift some things around next week." The room tilted, even though she was sitting still. They had planned this. Not only were they going to remove her from ownership, they were already replacing her. Not with a stranger, but with someone they called family. Someone whose place was secured with hugs and cameras and attention. She was the placeholder. The warm-up act. She looked at Ethan, who was now hugging the other grandmother, showing her his new toys. The woman clapped and cooed, already folding herself into the space. Her daughter-in-law turned back, sensing something. "I hope you're not upset. It's just that, well, Mom's always lived alone and she's getting older too. We just want to be fair." Fair. She almost laughed. Fair was a folding chair at the edge of a party. Fair was a razor in slow motion. She stood, just once, just enough to steady herself. Then she said, "You should check the gifts before someone throws out something important." She didn't wait for a response. The envelope was already there. She didn't wait for anyone to open the envelope. She didn't wait for gasps or questions or glances. The house was full of chatter and cupcakes and paper hats, but she simply walked down the hallway, opened the door to her small room, and shut it behind her with a soft click. There was no dramatic exit, no slam door, no speech. She sat on the edge of the bed, shoes still on, and stared at the blank wall in front of her. Her hands rested in her lap, motionless. Outside, the party carried on. Music, laughter, the sound of a magician pulling fake rabbits from a hat. But inside, it was quiet. For the first time in years, she liked the quiet. That night, she left the lights off and slipped beneath the thin blanket without brushing her hair or changing clothes. She didn't cry. She didn't need to. Everything had already been said, even if none of it had been out loud. She was done asking to be seen. The next morning, the email came. It was short, formal, from Harold Burns. Subject, action initiated. Property alert. Body. Per your instruction, a notification of ownership breach has been issued. Transfer attempt without joint consent flagged and frozen. Copies sent to residents and county clerk. You'll receive a hard copy by Tuesday. Harold. She smiled. By noon, the house felt different. The temperature had dropped, not literally, but in energy. Her son had received the letter first. She heard the paper rustle in the kitchen, followed by silence, then a low, "Jesus Christ." Her daughter-in-law was next. The mail carrier had dropped it off while she was watering the lawn, and she stood frozen on the porch, envelope in one hand, hose dripping onto the concrete. By dinner, no one said a word to her. The silence wasn't the same anymore. It wasn't dismissive. It was cautious. She ate at the table for the first time in weeks, fork scraping gently against her plate. Her son's eyes darted up occasionally, like he wanted to say something but didn't know how. Her daughter-in-law was stiffer than usual, using her napkin more than necessary. No one asked her to clean up. No one reminded her to keep the kids away from the cake. The power had shifted. She could have stopped there, but she didn't. The following week, she visited Harold's office in person. She wore her Sunday dress and her husband's old watch. The secretary offered her tea. She declined. When Harold invited her in, she sat down, opened her purse, and pulled out another envelope. Inside was a new document, one she had drafted with help. "I want to transfer the property," she said calmly. His eyebrows lifted. "To who?" "To them," she said, sliding over the pamphlet. It was from a nonprofit, Safe Roots, a small but powerful organization that turned private homes into protected housing for elderly women who had experienced domestic neglect or familial abandonment. "They have a wait list," she added, "and legal counsel ready to process the title. It stays under my name until I pass, but they'll inherit it in full. I've added a clause that allows me to reside here until I choose to leave." Harold leaned back in his chair. "That's one hell of a move." "They wanted to take it from me quietly," she said. "I'm just making sure it ends loudly." He smiled. "You sure about this?" "I've never been more sure of anything." 2 days later, her son sat her down at the dining table. "I got the letter," he said. "And the second one?" She nodded. "I assumed you would." "Mom, why would you do this?" "You mean protect myself? Or make sure this place doesn't become just another chapter in someone else's convenience?" "It's not like that." "It is exactly like that." Her voice was steady. She didn't raise it. She didn't flinch. "I didn't leave," she added. "But I also won't be erased." He leaned back, stunned. "You're giving the house away?" "No," she said. "I'm giving it to women like me, who were told they were in the way, who cooked and cleaned and raised children and were asked to disappear quietly." Her daughter-in-law entered the room halfway through the conversation, heard the last few lines, and stood by the counter in silence. "Where are we supposed to live?" she asked. "Wherever you like," she said. "The lease is renewable yearly, but you'll need to apply, like everyone else." She pushed her chair back, rose slowly, and turned to leave. "Oh," she added without looking back, "don't worry about my room. I won't be staying much longer." They didn't stop her. She walked down the hallway again, same footsteps, same cardigan. But this time, she didn't feel small. She felt tall. The moving truck came on a Thursday. No one helped her pack. She didn't ask. Her things didn't take up much space. 3 suitcases, a few boxes of books, 2 framed photographs, and a worn armchair she insisted on keeping. The rest belonged to them now, at least until the lease was up. She didn't leave a note. She didn't slam any doors. Just turned the key one last time, locked the door behind her, and slid the spare under the welcome mat. The new place was small, half the size of what she was used to, but it was hers. A 1-bedroom unit in a quiet complex for independent seniors, with a small garden patch in the back and neighbors who said hello without asking personal questions. The first night, she lit a candle and read a chapter of her favorite novel. The silence felt different here, peaceful, not loaded. She made her own dinner, set a place for one, and ate slowly. There was no tension in the air, no conversation to tiptoe around. Just stillness. That weekend, she hung a photo above her bed, a picture of her and her husband, taken on the day they signed the deed to the house. He was squinting into the sun, arm around her shoulder, a smudge of paint on his cheek. She was laughing. She didn't miss the old house. She missed what it had once been. But sometimes, to preserve what something meant, You had to let it go, or take it back in your own way. A week passed before the video arrived. It was sent from an unfamiliar email address with the subject line, "Happy birthday, Ba." She clicked it. The screen flickered to life, and there was Ethan, sitting cross-legged in his bedroom, holding a homemade card in one hand and a cookie in the other. "Hi, Ba," he said, his voice small but clear. "I know your birthday already passed, but Mom said it's never too late to say something nice." He looked down, then back at the camera. "I'm sorry we didn't have a party for you. I think you should have had one. You always made mine special." He held up the card. On it was a crayon drawing of a house with two stick figures in front, one tall, one small, both smiling. "I drew this for you. This is your house. You're the boss. You always were." He paused. "Even if they forgot, I didn't." Her hand went to her chest. "I love you, Ba. Come visit me soon. I miss your soup." The video ended. She sat there for a long time, staring at the blank screen, not crying, just remembering how deeply small voices can echo. Later that evening, she wrote back, not to the boy, but to the woman who had sent the email, her daughter-in-law. The message was short. "Thank you for letting him send that. I hope one day you understand what that house cost me and what it gave you. Take care of him. That's all that matters now." She didn't expect a reply. She didn't need one. That night, she walked outside to her little patch of garden. The community manager had given her permission to plant what she liked. She had already decided on roses. She stood barefoot on the dirt, breathed in the evening air, and felt something settle inside her, something that had been restless for too long. She wasn't a guest anymore. She never had been. In the silence of that new space, her voice returned to her, not in volume, but in weight. She began again, and maybe that was enough. In a small notebook by her bed, she wrote one final line before turning off the light. "If they build a house without room for your name, plant your name in the foundation anyway." Then, as the night wrapped around her, a final question lingered. Not for her, but for everyone else. If your mother became a stranger in the very home she helped create, would you stay quiet or would you speak up?